Trevor Roy Metcalfe was born on July 30th, 1964, in Cleveland, a district in North Yorkshire, England. Growing up, he lived in Brambles Farm, a small housing estate in East Middlesbrough, with parents James, a factory worker, and Brenda, a shop assistant. Trevor had at least 4 siblings, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Some modern reporting suggests he had 6 siblings. Trevor experienced a typical working-class upbringing, and it seems a happy childhood, until at age 17, a tragic accident ripped apart his family. During August 1981, the UK experienced a period of sustained hot weather. On Tuesday 18th of that month, Trevor, along with members of his family and extended family, took a trip to the seaside. They travelled 20 minutes to Redcar Stray, a wide stretch of open land along the seafront, known for its grassy dunes and views over the North Sea. It's a popular spot for walking, kite flying, and enjoying the coastline, away from the busier parts of Redcar. Trevor and his family settled on a spot on the sand, just up from Mask Beach. Coast Guards at South Gare had issued a report just hours before, saying the sea was smooth and there was no swell, so it promised to be a great day for bathing. While swimming with her brother and his son's girlfriend, who was soon going to be her daughter-in-law, Trevor's mum, Brenda, got into difficulties. A report in the Evening Gazette from 2019 says this happened after Brenda went to assist her son's girlfriend, who was struggling in the water. By the time Brenda was brought ashore, she was unresponsive, and attempts to revive her failed. Brenda was taken to Middlesbrough General Hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival. The loving mother and grandmother, her eldest daughter was married and had 2 small children, was just 42 years old. Police went to James Metcalfe's factory during his 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift to tell him the awful news about his wife. Brenda was known to be quite a strong swimmer and was not far from the shore when she drowned. It is believed a freak undercurrent was responsible for her death. At least 6 other people drowned in the sea off the northeast coast during the spell of hot weather. Brenda was described as a happy-go-lucky person who was always pleasant and talkative. Her absence left a huge hole in the lives of all who knew and loved her, not least that of her 17-year-old son, Trevor, who was left traumatised and broken. His father, James, later told the Middlesbrough Evening Gazette in 1998 that his son never recovered from this tragic event. In order to cope with the pain of losing his mum, Trevor began abusing solvents. In the years following, he developed a destructive addiction which saw his life spiral out of control. At the time, people with this addiction were commonly referred to as glue sniffers. Glue sniffing was a recognised public health concern in the UK during the 1980s, particularly amongst some groups of young people who used easily available household solvents to get intoxicated. Media coverage often portrayed it as a growing youth epidemic, which led to heightened public anxiety and government attention. In response, schools, charities and policymakers introduced education campaigns and harm prevention initiatives to address the risks and reduce solvent misuse. I certainly remember the sense of panic about glue sniffing in the late 1980s. I can vividly recall someone pointing out to me a discarded plastic bag near my home and telling me it had been used by a glue sniffer to get high. I also remember the stigma attached to people who were involved in glue sniffing. They were viewed as pariahs and outcasts, and not afforded a lot of grace or compassion from the media or general public. This prejudice and indifference is very evident in the aftermath of what would happen to Trevor. At 6:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 16th, 1989, a pensioner was out walking his dog around Dormanstown Recreational Ground off Trunk Road, the A1085 in Redcar. On the playing fields behind McLean Avenue which is on the opposite side of the field to Trunk Road, the dog walker came across the battered dead body of a young man. It was soon identified as being Trevor Metcalfe. He was just 25 years old. Persons Unknown is a true crime podcast dedicated to unsolved murders and missing persons cases from all over the world. I'm John. I live in Wales, UK, and I research, write and produce this podcast. New episodes are released every other Monday. If you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, please see the link in the show notes. For as little as the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can help to ensure these historical and lesser-known cases from around the world are read and gain exposure. The show notes are also where to find social media details, information about the sources used for each case, and transcripts for all the episodes. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider leaving a review on your app. They make a real difference, and I love reading them. Finally, you can help others hear about Persons Unknown by sharing and recommending on social media. Thank you so much for listening. Now back to this week's episode. Home Office pathologist Dr. Harvey McTaggart carried out the post-mortem and concluded that Trevor had died from bleeding to the brain, caused by several blows to the head. Numerous injuries and bruises were located all over the body. Some were consistent with Trevor having been kicked while he lay on the ground. According to a 2022 article from Teesside Live, bruises were found on Trevor's fingers, indicating he had used his hands to try to protect himself. At first, police did not rule out the use of a weapon, but eventually concluded the injuries had been the result of punches and kicks. No weapon had been used. The time of death was given as between 10:30 p.m. on Friday, September 15th and 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 16th. Just a note here, the time the body was found by the dog walker is variously reported as 6:30 a.m. and 7:15 a.m. Detective Chief Inspector Doug Smith of Cleveland Police said the murder was vicious and without an apparent motive. 40 detectives, soon increased to 50, were put on the case to piece together Trevor's movements over the previous day or so and to discover what had brought him to such a violent end. At the time of his death, Trevor had no fixed abode, but in the past lived with his stepmother Patricia in Brambles Farm, Middlesbrough. The Sunday Sun reported on September 17, 1989, that Trevor had not been in contact with his family for some time. However, only a couple of years before his death, Trevor had been living with his partner Susan and his young daughter in the Thorntree area of Middlesbrough. Trevor and Susan had met when she was 19 years old, and their daughter was born in 1985. Trevor and Susan separated in around late 1986 or early 1987. A major contributing factor was Trevor's solvent addiction, which was worsening. Following Trevor's murder, Susan told the Evening Gazette that Trevor recognised that the decision to separate and move out of the family home was in the best interest of his daughter, whom he loved dearly. As a result of his addiction, Trevor could often display antisocial behaviour, and he was no stranger to the courts. In the past, he had been in trouble for minor offences like petty theft, and he had previously spent 12 months on probation for a minor public order offence. Despite this, Trevor had no history of violence. In fact, he was far more likely to be in hospital himself, as he was often getting injured while he was high. He had been in hospital 18 times of various ailments and injuries. 13 of these occasions were during the 3 months prior to his death. Each time he had discharged himself or absconded from hospital, and would then find himself back on the streets. Trevor's probation officer had been trying to find him permanent accommodation in a rental property, but found that landlords would not take Trevor on because they viewed his use of solvents as a fire hazard. As you can see, Trevor was trapped in a vicious cycle. The following description of Trevor was given out by police through the press to see if any members of the public recognised seeing him over the 24 hours prior to his murder. He was 5'3", with a slight build and an unkempt, unshaven appearance. He had dark hair and was last seen wearing a blue two-tone anorak, blue jeans and black shoes. Through inquiries, police were able to piece together a partial timeline for Friday, September 15th, 1989. That morning, Trevor had been released from the cells at Middlesbrough police station after spending the night there for a minor public order offence. Skipping forward to the evening of that day, at around 7:30 p.m, Trevor visited the Great Mills superstore on Skipper's Lane Trading Estate in South Bank, near Middlesbrough. Here he bought brush cleaner and paint thinner. A police constable walking the beat saw Trevor near this location sniffing from a plastic bag. A blue and white can of paint solvent that Trevor had bought at Great Mills was searched for by police, but has never been found. From South Bank, Trevor got on a United bus and purchased a ticket for 25 pence. He travelled 2 miles and got off at the stop opposite the Magnet pub in Birchington Avenue, Grangetown. This is 3 miles southwest of Dormanstown, where Trevor's body was found. The next sighting of Trevor was between 8 and 9:30 p.m. in Ennis Square, Dormanstown. A witness saw Trevor staggering out of a fish and chip shop there between 9 and 9:30 p.m. This location is a mere 7-minute walk from the recreational ground. Police believe someone gave Trevor a lift to Dormanstown from Grangetown. One report mentions that he travelled by taxi. A pensioner who lived near the recreational ground said that at 11:45 p.m. on Friday the 15th, he had seen 2 people fighting on the grass pitch. One of the men was short and matched the description of Trevor. The other man was a lot taller. After a little while, both men stopped fighting and moved to the middle of the football pitch, where the fight started again. The witness said that the taller man was the aggressor, and he saw him punching and kicking the smaller man. The location where the fights happened was 200 yards from where Trevor's body was found. Shortly after seeing this running fight, the witness heard one man go down an alleyway at the back of his house. Having pieced this information together, the police set about trying to identify the man seen fighting Trevor. On the weekend following the murder, the police drafted in extra staff and carried out an operation in which motorists and local residents were questioned to see if they remembered anything from the previous weekend. 1,600 drivers were questioned by police on the trunk road between Middlesbrough and Redcar, and 300 people who lived in the vicinity of the recreation ground filled out questionnaires. Passengers on the bus Trevor had taken from South Bank to Grangetown were also spoken with. It was also understood that an engagement party had been going on in a community centre situated on Charlton Road in Dormanstown on Friday evening. This was a stone's throw from where the body was found. Attendees were interviewed, but I am unsure if anything useful was gleaned from the revellers. A week after the murder, investigators received an anonymous call from a person who claimed that he had picked Trevor up in Ennis Square, Dormanstown, when he fell in front of his car. This was at 11:50 p.m, so just 5 minutes after the witness saw the 2 men fighting on the playing field. Police were desperate for the caller to get back in contact to help pinpoint exactly when Trevor died. Police also wanted clarification, as they were unsure what the caller meant by saying they picked Trevor up. Did the person mean they literally physically picked him up off the road, or did they give Trevor a lift somewhere in the car? The Northern Echo reported on September 27, 1989, that a man had been arrested in connection with the case and was said to be helping police in the hunt for the killer. I can find very little information on this, but the man must have been released without being charged in connection with Trevor's death. By October 1989, it became obvious that the police were frustrated with the public response to the murder. Cleveland Police Detective Chief Constable Superintendent John Ferguson chastised what he called the uncaring response to Trevor's death. The police felt that during their inquiries they had come up against a wall of indifference, and Trevor's death was viewed as no great loss by a significant proportion of the local population. Due to his solvent addiction, his life was seen as worthless and his murder inconsequential. Superintendent Ferguson intimated that this viewpoint was a sad indictment of the people of Cleveland. At this stage of the investigation, there were certain questions the police were still attempting to answer, and several individuals that they had been unable to trace. The biggest puzzle was why Trevor had travelled to Dormanstown. It was not one of his known haunts, and it was not thought he had ever gone there before. Had he arranged to meet someone there, or was his visit unplanned and spontaneous? The Northern Echo reported on October 7, 1989, that the taxi driver was specifically asked by Trevor to drop him at Dormanstown. There were two people in particular that the police were keen to talk with. These men had come to the attention of the police via the testimony of a taxi driver who was travelling down Red Car Trunk Road on the night of the murder. At 11:30 p.m, he saw a man estimated to be 5'4", remember Trevor was 5'3", and who otherwise matched Trevor's appearance, walking alongside the road near Carey's Corner. Police believe this was Trevor. Walking towards Trevor were two casually dressed men, estimated to be aged 19 and 20. One was 5'1" and slim, the other 5'8" and stocky. 6 minutes later, the taxi driver returned along the same part of the road, but did not see any of the men. It was 250 yards from this location that a pensioner witnessed two men fighting on the recreational ground. Additionally, police were also trying to identify a man wearing a trilby hat, anorak and haversack who was seen walking his dog along Trunk Road at 1:15 a.m. on September 16th. Police were keen to speak with him, as he may have seen something of importance. Police pleaded with any other witnesses who were around that night and may have seen something to come forward. Police suspected that many people may have seen Trevor in distress and now felt guilty as they did nothing to help him due to his intoxicated state. The two youths seen near the murder scene on the night became a focal point of the investigation. On the day of Trevor's funeral, his stepmother Patricia appealed for them to come forward. She could not understand why they hadn't already, unless of course they knew who had killed his stepson. Trevor's funeral service was held on October 12th at Teesside Crematorium. The family of 12 mourners were led by Trevor's father, James. Trevor's two sisters and two brothers, as well as stepbrothers and sisters, were all in attendance. A service of remembrance was held at St Hilda's Chapel. In December 1989, the police held a press conference in an effort to republicise the case and reignite the investigation. It was stated that so far 4,500 leads had been explored, and 2,500 people had been interviewed, with 200 official statements taken. Despite this, the killer or killers had not been found. What police were confident of was whoever had done this would not have kept it to themselves. They were sure there were people shielding the killer. Investigators attempted to humanise Trevor to elicit a response from the public. No matter how provocative Trevor might be when he was under the influence of solvents, no one had the right to beat him to death. He was a small man and not violent, but on the contrary, a vulnerable person. Sadly, no breakthrough followed, and in April 1990, an inquest was held into Trevor's death. A verdict of unlawful killing was given by coroner Michael Sheffield. He concluded that due to the solvent abuse, Trevor's physical condition meant that he would not have been capable of defending himself, especially against an attack as vicious as the one he sustained. Try as they might, investigators had failed to make any connection between Trevor and Dormanstown. Nevertheless, police were convinced the answers to the case lay there, and an incident that happened a little over 6 months later strengthened this argument. In January 1991, disturbing graffiti was found daubed on the side of the changing room block that stood next to the recreational grounds where Trevor was found. The graffiti, which had been written in red paint, included the phrases, "Trevor deserves to die," "D-Town headhunters rule in the north," and most chillingly, "Catch me if you can." I'm sure you are aware that the term headhunters is often associated with gangs or organised football hooligan groups. I haven't been able to find out any further information on Dormanstown headhunters, assuming that is what the D stands for. Police wanted to find out who wrote the messages and why. Was it the same person or persons who had killed Trevor, and why had they waited until now to paint the messages? It was believed that the messages first appeared at the end of 1990, but police were not sure of the exact date. Inquiries never uncovered the writer or writers, or ascertained if they had any connection to Trevor's murder. After many years of stagnation, in August 1998, a new team was created at Cleveland Police to re-examine the case. Acting Detective Chief Superintendent John Kelly was in charge and went through 18 boxes of evidence, which included 20,000 documents and 2,500 witness statements. As a new appeal was made in the media, the apathy at the time of Trevor's death was highlighted. It was hoped that this time the plea would trigger a better response, which would see the murder finally solved. Just days into the reopening of the case, the police received an anonymous letter, postmarked Cleveland, which contained some new information. The letter, which was sent on August 26, 1998, was written on a foolscap piece of grey-lined paper. The police kept back much of what was contained in the letter, but did publish the opening few sentences. It read, quote, "How saddened I am to hear on TV that you have had no help with your appeal for clues to the Trevor Metcalfe murder. My conscience is telling me that I may be able to help you, or maybe not, but I'm going to reveal to you what I was told some years ago." Just a note to add, the writer of the letter omitted the E at the end of Metcalfe. The information then given by the writer was new to the investigative team, though it has never been released. Police urged the writer to get back in contact, but they never did. On the back of the renewed appeal, police received at least 26 telephone calls, many from people wishing to remain anonymous, but the letter and its contents did not lead to the case being solved. Over a decade later, in 2010, an anonymous call was made to Crime Stoppers concerning Trevor's case. A new lead was put forward, and while the information given by the caller was not made public, police said the details were very interesting. The information was brand new to investigators, and it was viewed as an opportunity to finally take the case forward. The police encouraged the caller to get back in contact, but as far as I'm aware, they never did. A few months after this development, Trevor's daughter, Claire, now aged 25, spoke publicly for the first time about the murder of her father in an interview with Teesside Live. Claire was only 4 at the time of her father's death and had only vague memories of him. She could recall glimmers, possibly a jumper worn by her father, or maybe a tattoo of 3 arms in a circle. Claire was not told the truth about her father's death until she was 10 years old. Prior to that, she had always called her stepfather Dad. It was now in her mid-20s that Claire had finally seen photographs of her together with Trevor. Claire expressed the pain and anguish she still felt. Trevor had missed out on so much with Claire, including being a grandfather. Trevor was a son, brother, and father who continued to be missed. Many lives had been shattered by what had happened to Trevor. Claire continued to be haunted by the fact that the killer had never been caught and was still out there. 15 years on from Claire's interview, not a lot has changed, and in September 2022, police confirmed that while the case remained open, it was no longer being actively worked. That same year, a Freedom of Information request was made to Cleveland Police by Teesside Live. The only information given was that over the years, numerous people had been interviewed, but there was no evidence to substantiate charges. When I first heard of Trevor Metcalfe's case, I knew I had to cover it on the podcast. His tragic descent into addiction is something that could happen to many of us given the right circumstance. His life was precious and he was robbed of a future he deserved to have. During the initial investigation, one of the lead police officers on the case said that we, meaning all of us, have failed Trevor in life. Let us not fail him in death. There is still time and opportunity for Trevor's family to receive some kind of justice on behalf of Trevor. If you have any information about the 1989 unsolved murder of Trevor Metcalfe, you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111.